I think you're thinking this about me. Because isn't that always the wonder? What do they think about me? What are they really thinking about me? We almost don't want to go because we don't want to screw things up. So in order to make yourself vulnerable, because in order to be vulnerable, you're making yourself, I guess, vulnerable to attack, vulnerable to criticism. And you have to be willing to make yourself vulnerable. It's just like guys, from that perspective, like, should you talk to your crush? The answer is yes, of course, yes, go. Well, but what if you coward, go. Because that's a big part of it. If you don't have the courage to go and talk to somebody, why would that person ever think that you have the courage to stand up for them in real life? It had to break down at some point because we all wear masks. Some are just more beautiful than others, but they get itchy after a while, so we take them off. And in his case, it sounds like the mask came off and he wasn't that mean, wretched, horrible human being who he pretended to be. In either case, as the prince or even as the beast. How do you see the good in others? And I think maybe the best way to see the good in others is to hope for the best in others. There's something there about vulnerability. Was it this class? I need to start keeping track of this. I need to write this stuff down. In one of my classes, I was talking about the 36 questions for falling in love. Was it this class? Yeah. And the point I was getting to with that was that it turns out that the thing that makes a person lovable is the fact that they're willing to be vulnerable. And then the second part is that a person allows the person near them to be vulnerable, and you feel like you can trust them with your vulnerability. So that seems to be that magic formula. So in other words, you have to be willing to put yourself out there. And I was talking to somebody not too long ago. We were talking about how so many of the things that we used to do when we were in high school, today people are just like, that's just weird. Like we used to talk to people, for example, not text them. We would call them. Like it amazes me, it blows me away. And I don't mean this as a criticism, I mean this as a narration. It blows me away how many students will talk to me about arguments that they're having with their significant others. And then I'll ask them, like, well, what did you say? Well, what'd they say? And they'll be like, oh, hold on, I'll just show you. Like, you did it in text? Like, in text, there's no tone. In text, how many of us are willing to actually text out our full thought? You're having to type for how long? And you can't do a lot of time. A lot of times you can't really convey what you're thinking and how you're feeling through text message. And if you think like, well, I can, come on, man. How often are we just like wrong about what a person meant to say, or things because tone doesn't come through, or we don't know how? I mean, we have a hard enough time saying what we mean to say. Think about how much harder of a time we have texting things, and then when you're talking to a person face to face, you can get the cues from them. How are they responding? How are they feeling about it? You can ask for clarification. And so we were talking about how different things are with that. But a big part of the communication is the ability to read a person and to see how they react to things and to feel that. So I mentioned the 36 questions because that's a big part of the vulnerability. Because you can, I don't know if I told you guys, but the last part of those 36 questions, the last question is something to the effect of, finish the following sentence. At this moment, we're both feeling, and you got to fill in the blank. Because that takes a lot of guts. Because imagine if you say, at this moment, we're both feeling interested in one another. And that person goes, what? No way. That's gross. You're ugly. No, you have to make yourself vulnerable to say, I think you're thinking this about me. Because isn't that always the wonder? What do they think about me? What are they really thinking about me? We almost don't want to go because we don't want to screw things up. So in order to make yourself vulnerable, because in order to be vulnerable, you're making yourself, I guess, vulnerable to attack, vulnerable to criticism. And you have to be willing to make yourself vulnerable. It's just like guys, from that perspective, like, should you talk to your crush? The answer is yes, of course, yes, go. Well, but what if you coward, go. Because that's a big part of it. If you don't have the courage to go and talk to somebody, why would that person ever think that you have the courage to stand up for them in real life? Imagine when things go bad, things go south, and they need someone, and they gotta look at you, and you gotta remind yourself, oh shoot, I'm the person who was too afraid to talk to them in the first place. And I understand why that terror is there, because it's a deep-seated psychological terror. Because when you're asking a person out, asking a girl, essentially what goes on there neurologically is they're assessing you. Is this the kind of person whose genes are worthy of going forward in the world? And when they turn you down, they're basically telling you your genetic line should end with you. It's an existential smash in the face. You don't think of it that way, but at this unconscious level, that seems to be what's going on. But if you can face that kind of fear and go forward anyway, well, then you're a courageous personality. And that's the person who people are willing to talk to. You ask, what is it that people want? Two things, right? Someone to make you laugh and someone to make you feel safe. So they're looking for a clown ninja. And a big part of being a ninja is having the courage to do the scary, dangerous, difficult things in life. And so if you can commit to doing that, now does that mean it's always going to go your way? No, but I mean, it more likely than through a text message. And if it's a person who's like, oh, but it's just weird that they were talking to me. That's a person who's got emotional guards up anyway. It's going to be difficult to go forward with that person anyway, in a meaningful way. Text messages are nice because it's this barrier where we can kind of like be safe because we don't have to face that face-to-face judgment. But then also now the question is, what does that mean? They didn't respond to me right away. They left me on red. Well, maybe they're just at work. Maybe they got distracted. Maybe this, maybe that. Oh my God, I'm going crazy. It's always the worst stuff. It's the not knowing, because as I keep saying so far throughout this semester, we populate the unknown with our imaginations. We don't know what's there. We think of the worst possible scenario. We probably don't sit there and go, wow, they haven't responded in 6 hours. Dude, they must be coming up with a really good response. They're probably they probably want to put their best foot forward. They want to impress me, so they're making sure that everything's perfect. So I'll just wait. No, we're thinking like, what did I say wrong? We're going back over the messages, see what we said wrong, what we did wrong. And so, sorry, I'm thinking of a friend of mine who had a date recently. Actually, I'm sorry, he fumbled it. He talked to the person on the phone and completely screwed it up. And she said to him, well, I'm gonna go watch TV. That's how she ended the phone conversation. You know what I'm talking about. You can probably guess. And she just said, well, I'm gonna go watch some television. So he's like, oh, okay. And he asked me, that was rude, right? I said, well, I think it's probably the nicest thing she could have said, because he told me how their conversation went. I'm like, yeah, dude, you screwed up every single aspect of that conversation. But that's him. That's what he does. And so, yeah, there's a lot, man. I don't want to go on for too long, because I want you guys to be able to finish the circle project. But others. Yeah. I just had to ask this question. Have you seen Beauty and the Beast? What is it that makes the Beast so lovable?
His personality.
What's it like? Go ahead.
Because he was like being loved and accepted by someone else. It made him grow.
It made him. Is that what you're saying? Makes him willing to be himself, so he can see who he really is.
He used to be like a selfish prince, so he was turned into a beast.
Oh.
But once he was learning to love again, he was starting to become a better person.
Interesting. So as a prince, did he get cursed or something?
Yeah.
Okay, so when he got cursed, the curse was that his outside would match his inside. It sounds like. Yeah. That's interesting, man. Because how it is that the beast sees himself, you can tell me if I'm wrong about any of this, but just from the things I've gathered, it sounds like he becomes a beast-looking thing, and then he kind of like sequesters himself away, and then his friends become the books, so he reads a lot. You say he lives in a library or something like that? Is this the case?
He had no friends.
He had the books, though, didn't he? That's almost as good. So here's the question. Did he have no friends because of himself, or is it that people didn't want to be around him? In other words, did he push people away, or did the people go away from him?
Both, kind of. So I feel like he was more ashamed of like, damn, I got turned into this beast and I'm ugly and no one wants me and I'll never have a wife. And then people were scared of him, so they didn't want to be around him anymore.
That's funny. Was he wrong or was he right? That nobody wanted to be around him.
It's kind of right, because everyone was scared of him.
Yeah. But who comes along eventually? The movie tells us in the title, right? Yeah. So then the beauty comes along, and she sees him for something else. She sees him not for what he not what he appears to be, but she sees a little something else. And that's why I asked that question if he was right, because think about all the people who went away from him. I wonder if they went away from him because he was no longer like, I mean, he was the prince, I guess, but he wasn't, his old, good-looking, charming, blah, blah, blah self. In other words, they as soon as things got difficult in his life, as soon as he got cursed, I mean, quite literally, but also metaphorically, if they just go away from him at that point. And then he's got to kind of get by on and when his outside now matches his inside. But then someone comes along and sees something else in him, and it's that willingness for she first presents the idea of accepting him, and then he allows himself to be vulnerable, and then when he allows himself to be vulnerable, she accepts that big part of him, and which allows him to be more vulnerable, and then her as well, and then they dance at some point, don't they? Yeah, I remember that much. Anybody in here not dance? If you don't dance, you should dance. Even if you've got nowhere else to do it but your own room. Or I said in the shower, but no, don't dance in the shower, it's slippery. You should dance. I'm thinking about that because then that means that the prince then lost the people around him who weren't really his friends. He lost the people who were judging him from his appearances, from the way that he looked. And then they thought he looked scary. And then here's the worst part. He believed it. He thought that about himself. He's like, man, no one's ever going to want me. I'm ugly, I'm this, I'm that. But here's the thing. He was wrong. Because the beauty does come along. Somebody is accepting him for who he is, but he pushes so many people away. He doesn't give them the opportunity to accept him and to love him and appreciate him for who he is. And so, was he as ugly as he imagined? No. Was he, as mean or horrible as he imagined? No, because it was not who he really was. It had to break down at some point because we all wear masks. Some are just more beautiful than others, but they get itchy after a while, so we take them off. And in his case, it sounds like the mask came off and he wasn't that mean, wretched, horrible human being who he pretended to be. In either case, as the prince or even as the beast. Interesting. Others? Okay. I said I don't want to say too much about it because I want you guys to get a chance to do the poster stuff. So, one thing I just want to say is one thing here. He said they're able to see the good in others. It's the ability, like if you're going to be leading people, how do you see the good in others? And I think maybe the best way to see the good in others is to hope for the best in others. In other words, you can look at a person and say, I see what you are right now, but to be able to imagine what a person could possibly be and to hope that they will be better, to see the best in them. I think of a friend of mine has this son. He's a cool name. His name is Luna. It's a cool name. And I think he's a good dude. She says he's an absolute terror. But I'm like, nah, dude, you gotta see the best in this guy. You gotta see the best in this kid. And I interact with him. I have no problems with him. He's a good dude, man. He's a really good dude. Kind, caring, sweet, all that stuff. But then she's always telling me, oh, he's such a demon. He's really such a demon. I don't know, man. I see the best in him. Maybe that's why I get the best out of him. Because I see the best in him.